So here we are, Washington's War, the beginning of the 1778 turn. The regulars have already gone away due to von Steuben. We have a little bit of a dance going on, actually. Burgoyne swung over to Springfield to try to capture Greene, or try to attack Greene. His goal there is to cut off, or was to cut off, the Connecticut, Rhode Island troops. Well, Greene managed to withdraw. He's very good at that, as is Washington. He only had one strength point. He didn't want to fight. Then, on the American turn, he played some reinforcements, and now he has a decent enough army that he can probably take Burgoyne. Greene indeed went after Burgoyne, defeated him, pushed him back, increasing the French alliance marker. The Brits brought Clinton into play down at New Bern, moved up to Norfolk, and we see how weak a leader Lafayette is with his one agility. That means he can't withdraw from combat. He doesn't do much damage. He's really been he was a poor choice to put down there. Problem is, I didn't want to spend on one of these others, a Lincoln or a Lee or a Gates, who have the requirement to be activated with 2-point cards. I wanted the quick activation. Now I've got all my quick activation leaders on the board. Lafayette unfortunately sucks when engaged by the enemy. I wish I could have Washington down there, but Washington kind of has to face Howe at this point. Strangely, we'll see if there's a card, but the fact that Howe is allowed to remain in the game so long kind of disturbs me. Maybe I'm hoping there's some kind of card to remove him, because he is really, really potent, even if slow moving. His ratings are just very, very good. Okay, so Washington went down and attacked Cornwallis, defeating him, and now we've got the French alliance one box away. We're going to see the alliance probably next turn if the Americans can get another battle in, or some other effect to raise that. Saw a couple more interesting plays. The Brits expanded the time period until North's government falls. This is probably actually important because right now there are only a couple of years left, and they were fairly far behind. However, you would expect as the game goes longer, the less chance the Brits are going to have of winning. So it's hard to tell whether they really wanted that. On the other side, Americans played Nathan Hale, grabbed a couple of quick territories, and this is going to cut off. Oh, not quite. Shit. Okay, I thought it was going to cut off the New York state line. Wow, that has to be fixed by me. That was an error. Okay, and then the Brits played what they had to, Benjamin Franklin, Minister to France, and boom, France is coming in next turn. And the Americans moved Arnold down to grab Ticonderoga. They want to get New York State over onto their side, and they've got mostly, they've got a good positioning in Massachusetts. So right now, they feel like they've largely won in the Northeast. They just have to consolidate their gains. The South, however, was a failure with Lafayette down there, no question. Okay, let's finish up the last card play for each. Okay, so the turn ended. Let me see about the play. Ended. I'm trying to remember. The British. Burgoyne pulled back to Newport, and at the very least, he's going to take that colony, Rhode Island, and add it to the British wing column. On the other hand, Washington, after much thought, he considered coming down and taking the southern command away from Lafayette, decided to attack Howe, and he charged up from Monmouth in against Howe, and was defeated. It was an even fight, and he ended up losing 2 combat units. Howe lost 1. The goal there, again, shift New York, try to bottle the British up. It didn't work. I think it was worth the risk at this point. So now I'll do the finish of the turn and show you what happened then. So at the end of 8, we're bringing the French on this next turn. What do we see? Well, this is basically the layout. The South is pretty much the same as it was. North Carolina is still rebel. The North, the New York move did not work, mainly because I failed that. I didn't want to spend a 2-point card when Washington was in bad supply, but he ended up in bad supply at Morristown. That's one of the risks of the whole thing, I guess. I shouldn't have attacked for that, but I couldn't find better places to go. So we got a conversion over here in Newport, and now we see the Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York have all fallen back under Tory influence. All right, that's about where we are. The only question now is how big an effect France is going to have. The game notes suggest that it is the game changer. And the only reason I can see for that is the navies. Because the troops, they're just not going to affect it that much. And their leader, Rochambeau, he's good, but he's not great. We've got good leaders on the board. So it's got to be the Navy that's the big effect. And so far, I haven't been using the Navy too much as the British. So their ability to move between ports and the like. I think it doesn't change their supply status. I'll look that up to make it sure. But if it changed supply status, it would be a huge factor. If I could blockade this, well, it wouldn't be cut off until it's surrounded. But still, you see what I mean. I know that reinforcements can't go in, and I know that I can't ship in and out of those ports. So I can bottle up a big army at a port, and stick Howe in New York and not let him out. That would be impressive. But it's not the same effect as, say, Massachusetts is no longer linked to Britain, so I can cut it off much more easily. I have to take Boston, and I have to take Providence in order to defeat and these other smaller towns, Innsmouth and Sarnath, all those Greek Lovecraftian towns. I have to do those things in order to, boy, this is still pissing me off that it can be there. Anyway, if I have to take each territory, each of those in turn, it's going to be a lot harder to do conversions. So I don't think it is that big a game changer. I think that it is going to limit Britain's options a little bit, that's all. Okay, so it turns out I kind of cheated towards the end of the last turn. When the French came in, and now we're in European war, which has some differences on the card play. And the British have to lose 2 combat units. That happens in the end phase, so that I haven't done yet. But more importantly, I hadn't played the French Navy yet, and I hadn't played the French troops yet. The British could have held off and played the event as their last event. It didn't really affect anything as far as I remember. So I've got the French landed at New Bern, and they're going to be the main foil for Clinton over here. Since they're below the winter zone, they wouldn't have suffered. And the Navy I've got blockading Howe, primarily to keep Howe himself from leaving. Basically, the 3 major forces of British troops that I've got on the board are all about equal troop-wise, but Howe is far and away the best commander out of the bunch, and I don't want him having an easy out. I guess that's the only real thought that I have, and I also don't want him getting a lot of troops. I want him stuck. He's at 3 troops. I think I can knock him out. Hopefully there's a card that removes him from the game. He should not be in command at this point. Alright. Beyond that, we got Cornwallis came back from his captivity. And I'm going to actually start the game. I got to figure out where I'm going to remove a couple of strength points from the Brits just before I go. I don't know where that's going to be. They really can't afford it anywhere. So for the early stages of the turn, this is 1779, first turn of the European War. Put them together if you like. Howe opened things up by marching down on Philadelphia. Washington couldn't catch him. He wanted to. I don't know why. Odds aren't that great. Then, the hell did the Americans then filled Oswego by discarding a card that they could no longer play, and that's going to force a reshuffle of the deck. And I have to say, reshuffling that deck is a lot less pleasant than I thought. The cards are indeed as stiff as I have complained about in others, and they're very much of a pain to deal with. Then the Brits played some reinforcements and brought Cornwallis in to replace Burgoyne. He's got 6 troops there. It may be enough to handle Greene. He wants to maintain a presence in those valuable New England states. On the other side, let's see, the Americans upped the year that the game is going to end in, to 1783. That's the maximum possible. That kind of worries the Brits. They're thinking, yes, the Americans are winning right now, but maybe, just maybe, we'll get a break and in a couple of years be able to do something. But it's going to be tough no matter what. All right. There's nothing but partisan warfare going on in the South right now. First, North Carolina got to remove a couple of U.S. counters, and then the Swamp Fox got to remove something from Georgia, which is now uncontrolled, and something from South Carolina, which is now uncontrolled. So the British cause is looking less and less hopeful there. Okay, Cornwallis launched an attack against Greene and forced him to fight again. I think that happened a little earlier in the game, at Springfield this time. Pushed him back, caused a casualty without taking one in return. It looks like Cornwallis may actually be able to hold on to this kind of New England area without any help from anyone else. I can't see him holding New York City, but right now he's got a fairly good hold. The Americans played a 3-op card over there and grabbed Georgia, South Carolina, and a space in North Carolina, and now the map looks almost entirely blue. Even with these red units kind of moving south, they've gotten control of everything except that New England area. Now, of course, Connecticut, Hartford is due to fall, but we're also probably going to see New York swing into the American side the way things are lined up right now. So the Americans have been playing ops cards fairly heavily, trying to get control of some of these colonies. And I rolled a die to decide, will that tip the Brits off? Because, you see, the Americans are holding this. And I decided, yes, it would. By the way, that means the game just ended. So, in tipping the Brits off, they had more ops cards in their hand that were unused and counteracted that. And this is the final state tally. 5 for the U.S., 3 for the Brits. Because the U.S. did not get 7 colonies converted over, and that includes Canada even. Oh, that's not over. New York's not done. Okay, well, right now, the situation is such that the Americans would lose. Because the Brits just have to... So, if the Brits get 6 colonies, they win. If the Americans don't get 7, then the Brits win. I don't think that there are 2 colonies ready to swing over, but we know New York State is. I have to see where other things fall. Okay, I'll be back in a moment. So I had a miscount on the board. First of all, Camden went over, which meant not only did New York swing, but South Carolina did. But also, somehow, I wasn't counting North Carolina, and the Americans clearly have 3 counters there to 1 British, and that was the case before. Of course, all game I had Maryland marked as U.S., and it wasn't. So, and little things like that are going to catch me, especially playing solitaire. Anyway, we clearly have a U.S. victory. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 colonies swing over. To 4 British, the big change there being they gained Connecticut. Now, it wasn't until late in the turn that they began suspecting, and they thought, okay, I have a chance to stop them, so I will. They probably would not have played it the way they did, with all the ops cards going to try to prevent a victory, if they didn't have enough to do that. But, so, this is the end that we have. It felt kind of strange for the U.S. to be holding the card that says, oh yeah, I know the game's going to end now. On the other hand, it feels kind of strange, let's say, if the British won when the government fell. The concept that, oh, the British government's going to fall, we're going to pull out of this war, and we'll come out maybe not so poorly. It doesn't feel that right to me. Maybe the designer is making a statement here of belief that there is no way that the British could have suppressed the revolution. I don't think that's the case. I think that it would have been possible. But if you take the stance that it is not possible, then this is not a completely unreasonable way to handle things, with a random event deciding when the game ends. I'm a little iffy on the fact that the Americans hold the foreknowledge of that event and not the British. I'm a little iffy that anyone holds the foreknowledge of that event and is able to really calculate out a victory. That's a very powerful card if that's the case. The one that says, hey, the game's going to end right now, not 2 to 3 turns from now. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'll give this one a real review, in whatever sense I give reviews.